talking now about the 3 ways in which you can create a feeling of self-satisfaction. The second trigger of laughter is to lead the audience into perceiving an incongruity, something that doesn't fit something else or that is a mismatch. And incongruities can be produced in a great many different ways. One of the ways is to have language that does not match the character that uses it. There's a very famous cartoon in the New Yorker magazine many years ago which showed a mother trying to persuade her little 7-year-old boy to eat broccoli. And she said, "It's broccoli, dear, it's broccoli." And the little boy replied, "I say it's spinach, and I say to hell with it." There's another example of mismatched language in a story that involved Michelangelo, the great artist. He was painting the Sistine Chapel, and he dropped his brush on the floor, and he said, "I'll be damned." So he had to climb down, and when he got to the floor, there was a nun. And she said, "I heard what you said, and you shouldn't use that kind of language. What you should say when something like that happens is, 'Heaven saves.'" And he nodded, and he went back. And shortly after he got back up there, his ladder began to go out. And he almost said, "I'll be damned" again. But then he remembered what the nun said, and he said, "Heaven saves." And miraculously, the ladder stopped moving backwards, and it went back to its original position. The nun was down there, and she saw this. She said in amazement, "Oh, I'll be Other types of incongruity are understatement, exaggeration, conflicting meanings, irrelevance, ambiguity, nonsense. For example, the kind of nonsense that Yogi Berra spouted when he said, "Nobody goes to that restaurant anymore, it's too crowded." So those are some examples of incongruity. The third trigger of laughter is surprise. And surprise happens when the joke teller seems to be taking you down one path, and then all at once he switches you to another. And we can do that, of course, because so many words have more than one meaning. For example, 2 old maids went for a tramp in the woods. The tramp got away. There's a switch of this type in the story about an old lady who lived to be 100 years old who was being interviewed by a reporter about the incidents in her long life. And finally he asked the old lady, "Have you ever been bedridden?" And she said, "Yes, hundreds of times, and twice in a haystack." Another joke that takes us down one track and then switches us to another involved an airline pilot who was being given a physical examination. And the doctor said, "When did you have your last sex experience?" And he said, "In 1959. And the doctor said, "So long ago?" When the airline pilot looks to watch it, it's only 21:20 now. I'm sure a number of you have noticed that often in a single joke, more than one trigger, and generally speaking, the more triggers that you can put into a joke, the greater the laugh is likely to be. I'm going to tell a joke now that contains all of the triggers of laughter that I've mentioned. It involved a man and a woman, both of whom stuttered. And they went independently to a golf course. And the manager thought it would be a good idea to have them introduce themselves so that they could then play together. So he asked them to introduce themselves. And the man said, "My name is Peter, but I'm not a saint." And the lady said, "My name is Mary, but I'm not a very good player." Getting the point. It makes fun of stutterers, which we really shouldn't do, but it puts stutterers down. It approaches the forbidden, doesn't quite reach it, but it approaches it, thus it challenges it to do. It's a ludicrous situation, so it involves an incongruity. And of course, it has a surprise. So it has all of the triggers. Well, thus far I've analyzed the anatomy of a joke, the parts that make it up. And I think that I'll conclude with giving you some further ideas about what you can do to help a joke along, to make it funnier than it might otherwise be. And one of the ways that you can do that is to use funny words. Now, words are funnier than other words for reasons that nobody's ever been able to figure out. There have been some theories about it. For example, Don Rickles called somebody in the audience a hockey puck, and everybody laughs because it's a funny word or a funny term. If he called them a baseball, nobody probably would laugh because baseball is not a funny word. And so what you want to look for are funny words. Sometimes place names help you along a great deal because there are a lot of funny place names. For example, in the Cotswold area in England, there's a town called North Piddle. And I think you can have a lot of fun with that as a joke. Some of you remember the sketch of the routine in the Jack Benny programs in which a train announcer would reel off a list of train stations, and he would end with Anaheim, Azusa, and Cucamonga. And everybody, although they'd heard it numbers of times, they'd still laugh because those are funny sounding words. My wife Zella here was born or was brought up near Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. That's kind of a funny name. You can also make up funny names for people. Charles Dickens was a master at this.